Baker Mayfield wants to take it up a notch. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at @JYarcho_Bucs. Credentialed member of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you 3 days a week for the time being. We'll get back to 5 days a week coming up in July. But I want to thank all of you for your continued support of the show, especially through the offseason. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. No ads, no hashtags, no anything like that. Just one-on-one conversations with me about the Bucs, the NBA Finals, hockey. I was chatting with somebody about racing the other day. I was letting people know about my mom's birthday party that we had over the weekend. So lots of stuff for the Locked On Bucs insiders. You can join by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The mailbag forces me to pull out my crystal ball, and there appears to be a new leader in one of the position battles that is coming up in a little bit. But let's start with Baker Mayfield and his status for the upcoming season. Baker Mayfield obviously coming off a really solid year for the Buccaneers, one of the best for him personally, and he's looking to build off of that like we all hope that he would. That's one of the great things about Baker, is that he never really seems like the type that's satisfied. He's always striving to get better, to do more, and to improve. He's always working on that, always making improvements, always trying to quiet the doubters, of which there are still many. Baker was talking about the difference between last season and where he is now, following that big contract that he got from the Bucs and where he is as a player. Baker said, quote, "Obviously, last year was a lot of trying to learn the system on the fly, get to know my teammates as well, balancing that performance versus getting to know everybody and trying to be a leader. But now going through it, obviously you have some new faces here, but going through a year with these guys, trying to be more in command, I am vocal, but most of the time I'm only vocal when I need to be. I'm kind of a lead by example type guy. So really now it's taking the next step in the vocal aspect, getting everybody on the same page. You never want to feel comfortable. Yeah, it is great that I know I'm going to be here for the next couple of years. Of course, that means I get to settle in here, be myself even more so, and push these guys to the next level. It's a good feeling." End quote. Hearing that and really thinking about it, it seems like we have kind of the perfect storm for Baker to have another career year. The juggling of a new team, building chemistry, coming off of a year where he was bounced between 3 teams in just a few months, learning a new offense, and then asked to be a leader was a lot. But he did it really, really well. Again, over 4,000 yards, almost 30 touchdown passes, just 10 interceptions. Now he's had to learn a new offense again, kind of, right? Since he's already played in this type of offense before when he was in Los Angeles, but the chemistry has already been built. He's not out at practices or in the building having to prove himself to his teammates, to his coaches, to the front office. He's not having to do all of that again. He is the leader. And I emphasize that he is the leader. He's not trying to be the leader. He's not trying to earn a position as a leader. He's not doing any of that. He is the leader. How many guys are in this offense that he has to get to know that weren't here last year? 5, 6. I mean, even Sterling Shepard is a new face to the Buccaneers, but not to Baker. So he's got 2 offensive linemen from other teams, and then he's got a handful of rookies. The chemistry is already there. Those relationships are there. It's all about building off the foundation that was established last season and making everything better. And some don't believe that they will be. Shout out to Everydayer Mad Dog. He sent me an article today where Vic Tafur of The Athletic said that the Bucs are among his best bets to hit the under on their projected win total for the season. The Bucs win total, according to FanDuel, is 7.5 after winning 9 games last season. For reference, the Falcons are at 9.5, the Saints at 7.5, and the Panthers at 5.5. Vic said, quote, I don't know how Baker Mayfield did it last season, scrambling around to buy time and make big throws to win a lot of tight games. He got rewarded with a big contract, as did Mike Evans, and I'm not sure that's the best thing for the Buccaneers in the long term or in the short term. They lost offensive coordinator Dave Canales to the Panthers, and I see regression on offense. I also see a defense that lost Shaquille Barrett, Devin White, and Carlton Davis. End quote. Tell me you didn't do anything but scout box scores without telling me you didn't do anything but scout box scores. Someone in the chat, please let me know if I'm missing something here, but tell me what Shaq Barrett, Devin White, or Carlton Davis did last season that the Bucs are going to miss this coming year. Yeah, Shaq had his pick 6 against Chicago to seal that game, and that was awesome. But did any of them do anything last season that makes you go, man, the Bucs are really going to miss that on defense this year? No, they didn't. Carlton Davis missed games like he always does. Devin was nothing more than a distraction all season with his pouting and his temper tantrums, and he'll survive maybe a game in Philly before the fans turn on him in typical Philly fashion. And Shaq had fewer sacks than Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Tell me what those guys leaving is going to cost the Buccaneers in 2024. Tell me what Dave Canales leaving is going to cost the Buccaneers in 2024. Stubbornness in the run game, inability to adapt to your opponent. I mean, I'm failing to see where Vic is going with this assessment here. I'm going to jump into the live chat real quick before we move on. We got Mike in the chat says, good evening, everyone. I like the later lives. I can actually be here for it. Yeah, the lives are going to fluctuate a little bit. You know, with the off season, it's always kind of tough to nail some of these down. You guys know, during the regular season, everything is very regimented. You know, I'm going live after, the game on Sunday or the occasional Thursday night or the Monday night. And then boom, you're going to have episodes every single morning after that. But always alive at least once a week during the regular season in that post-game reaction episode. Gary in the chat says, I don't think Baker is all about the money. I absolutely agree. I don't think he is either. Baker is one of those guys that absolutely loves the game of football. He loves the camaraderie with his teammates. He loves just playing. And yeah, the money is great for him. And this contract was big for him for a couple of reasons. I do believe that's the biggest, financial contract that he's ever gotten in the NFL. I didn't vet that. So if I'm wrong, you can let me know in the chat, but it gives him a sense now of stability where he knows he's with the Buccaneers for the next couple of years. He doesn't have to worry about being traded off to another team or being cut or things like that. He has that stability. They can build off of what they did last year, and he knows he is the Buccaneers guy. There's no fighting for a position. There's no battling to be the starter. He's the dude. And I think that is going to come with a little bit of a level of comfortability for him. And it's going to take a little bit of the weight off of his shoulders where he can relax a little bit. I'm going to talk more about that coming up in just a little bit. Richard in the chat says happy Monday. Happy Monday to you, Richard. We do have Fausto in the chat who's making dinner for everybody. For those interested, he's cooking up some chicken breasts and chicken thighs. So as soon as this is over, we're all going to Fausto's house and we're going to eat chicken and watch the NBA Finals. I will tell you why the big contracts for Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans were the best thing for the Buccaneers, as I also dive into the mailbag. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. The Los Angeles Dodgers are currently the favorite to win the World Series at plus 270. The Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers are tied as Super Bowl favorites at plus 600 each. And if you wanted to get ahead for next year, the Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals in 2025 at plus 300, while the Florida Panthers are the favorite for next year's Stanley Cup Finals at plus 900. Your beloved Buccaneers are plus 5,500 to win the Super Bowl behind the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Chicago Bears, among others. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Every day, make sure you are coming back on Wednesday. I will be here with a new episode on Wednesday. We might go live early on Wednesday, and then we'll have the follow-up episode coming on Thursday. Remember, I'm going to be out of town. We leave Thursday to go to Niagara for my son's hockey tournament. So I will be gone Thursday through Sunday. So we're going to have episodes dropping for you on Wednesday and on Thursday, talking about the Buccaneers. In the meantime, though, are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that manufactured fake arguing and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that fake screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A mailbag question came in from Insider David, and he asked, how many points per game do I think the Buccaneers will average this season? So here's a long-winded response to that, as well as why good old Vic Tafur is dead wrong about the contracts for Baker and Mike not being good for the team. So during the first 3 years under Bruce Arians, the Bucs were third, and second in the NFL in points per game. Arians leaves, Byron Leftwich takes sole control of the offense, and they plummet all the way to 25th because Byron Leftwich was a terrible offensive coordinator when he did not have Bruce kind of taking the reins away from him in key moments. Last year, they had Dave Canales. No Tom Brady. They add Baker Mayfield. He comes in, and they go from 25th up to 20th. Last year, the Buccaneers scored 21.2 points per game. In 2022, it was 18.2. So that's a full 3 points per game that they went up from 2022 to 2023. However, that's a far cry from the 29.9 per game in 21, 30.8 per game in 20, or the 28.6 per game in 2019. With Liam Cohen calling the shots, coming from that Sean McVay offensive system, the Bucs are going to be a very different type of offense this year. Dave Canales didn't come from the types of offenses that Cohen did, and Canales isn't around anymore to keep the Bucs in bad run plays and stick with them out of sheer blind stubbornness. The power of the play calling is now in the hands of Baker and the offensive leaders. More importantly, they're in the hands of guys like Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. I've talked about it a few times, but Cohen came out and said that they're going to call 3 or 4 plays in the huddle and allow the players to decide what's best based on the look they're getting from the defense. That wasn't how things were under Canales. It was run up the middle, pass. And he was openly stubborn about it. Yes, I was in Dave's corner more often than most people were last year when he was trying to establish the run, but even I had my limits. It wasn't until Rashad got involved in the passing game that things started to turn around for the offense. Now, there's going to be a lot more running through the air earlier in the season with Rashad and Bucky compared to last year when it was about the midway point when they really started to utilize Rashad in that short passing game. Plus, you would obviously hope that there's better interior blocking, not just for the run game, but also to protect Baker Mayfield. Moving Chris Godwin back to the slot is going to make the offense look more reminiscent of where they were in 2021 and 2020. Then you add McMillan into the fold. You add Sterling Shepard into the fold. You still have Trey Palmer. All of that is an upgrade over last season. So let's go ahead and run down the list here. All right. Quarterback, I'm going to say upgrade over last year because you have Baker back for his second year and he's become much more comfortable with the organization and his teammates. That's going to allow him to play a little more freely. I'm going to say that 2024 Baker is an upgrade over 2023 Baker. Let's take a look at running back. They add Bucky Irving, upgrade over last year. Wide receiver, just talked about it. Godwin back to the slot. Jalen McMillan is here. Sterling Shepard is here. Trey Palmer is going to have his role. That's an upgrade over last year. Tight end, it's going to stay the same. I don't think Devin Culp moves the needle in 2024, so we're going to say that that's the same as last year. Offensive line, huge upgrade in Graham Barton alone. Plus, you have a likely upgrade at left guard over Aaron Stinney and Matt Filer in their, dual starts in 2023. At the very least, guard is going to be the same, but center, you still have the huge upgrade there with Graham Barton. So you have upgrades nearly across the board for this offense. Then you have an upgrade at offensive coordinator. No offense to Dave Canales, but you have an upgrade now with Liam Cohen. A big enough upgrade that we could be talking succession plan when Todd Bowles decides to leave and Liam Cohen could potentially become the next head coach. We're talking that kind of upgrade. I've mentioned it on this show a couple of times. I never got that feeling, around the hiring of Dave Canales, that this could be a guy that if Todd Bowles moves on in 2 or 3 years, he could become the head coach. Now he's got his head coaching opportunity and it's elsewhere, but I feel like Liam Cohen was a very strategic hire for this franchise with the future in mind, that they are going to say, look, you gotta stick with us here for a couple of years at OC. You're going to become the next head coach when Todd Bowles decides to walk away from the game, which he's been talking about doing for a little while now. That's why those contracts for Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield were not bad for the Buccaneers in the short or the long term, and why the Bucs yet again will prove the odds makers and the doubters wrong. I said it all offseason last year, and I'm saying it again this year. This is a 9+ win team, probably around 10 or 11 wins for this Buccaneers team, and they are going to win the division again. The Saints were the new hotness and the sexy pick last year. Now it's the Atlanta Falcons. The Bucs continue to get slept on, and at this point, I think that's how they like it. With Liam Cohen putting the power of the play calling in the hands of the leaders, Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield are the 1A and 1B on that list, and that is why those contracts were pivotal to any success that the Buccaneers have this year, Vic. I'm sorry to be the one to let you know. All of that said, let's circle back to David's question. I think the Bucs could easily be in the 25 points per game range. That would be a 3.8 points per game jump over last year and nearly a point per game improvement over their previous jump from 2022 to 2023. So instead of a hard, firm number, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give the Locked On Bucs over under on points per game in 2024, and I'm going to set it at 24.9. Let me know in the live chat if you are going over or under. I'm going to jump into the live chat again before we hit the next break. Lakita in the chat says, cannot wait for the Rashad and Bucky show. I'm excited for it. I really, really am. I think Bucky Irving, he has grown so much on me since that draft weekend. I really think he's going to be a solid weapon for the Bucs this year. Tyler in the chat says checkdowns are a part of those good reads. Absolutely. The checkdown is your friend. Last year, Baker was having to run for his life. He threw some YOLO passes, and those checkdowns, once he started getting those a little bit more incorporated into the offense, that was when we saw, because we had that lull there coming out of the bye week. When Rashad started getting a lot of those checkdowns, Cade Otton got a lot of those checkdowns. That's when the offense and the team started to trend back up, and they went on that run to end the season. BB King in the chat says interior offensive line now a strength, was our biggest weakness last year. I agree wholeheartedly, as does Lakita in the chat. She says agree. BB. We got B Skrills in the chat saying 10-7 NFC South clinch, and then all kinds of emojis in there. I love that. A new leader emerges in a key position battle. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a live episode of Locked On Bucs. Shout out to all of you in the chat. You guys are seriously the absolute best. I love all of you. There are some key position battles that we are going to be keeping an eye on here throughout the offseason and into training camp, and I have talked about them ad nauseum. Wide receiver 3 through 5, all up for grabs. Those are key battles. Running back 2 is a battle between Bucky Irving and Chase Edmonds. Inside linebacker might become an interesting battle, even though I still think it's KJ Britt's job to lose right now. Slot corner, that is a battle. The edge rusher rotation is a battle that Randy Gregory seems to have removed himself from for the time being. We'll see what happens there. But of course, the starting left guard job is a major battle for this roster. Sua Opeta is the player that I've kind of defaulted to referring to in that starting role. But as the great Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friends. It seems as if Ben Bredeson is starting to take charge. Opeta had received a lot of praise from the coaches, and they were essentially referring to him far more often when discussing the offensive line, going back to OTAs, going back to, the voluntary workouts and all those things. Yeah, and that's kind of why I defaulted to referring to him along the same lines as the rest of the starting offensive line. However, as mandatory minicamp got underway, it was Bredeson that was with the first team offensive line more often than not. In fact, he took every single snap with the first team offensive line on all 3 days of mandatory minicamp. Todd Bowles was asked about who stood out over the course of minicamp, and he said, I would say obviously Bredeson from the Giants. He comes up. It's not a popular name, but he comes up, end quote. Now, to be fair, he did go on to mention Opeta, and he told the media that it was going to be a heck of a battle between the two. But all signs now point to Bredeson getting the upper hand before training camp starts. Here's why that's so important. The offensive line, more than any other unit on the team, has to gel, and they have to do it quickly. They cannot waste time having guys pop in and out regularly. You can't have a rotation there. These guys need to know who is going to be on either side of them, and then they can get to work. We talk about trust between quarterbacks and receivers. We talk about trust in the relationship between a quarterback and a center. We talk about all those sorts of things. But it's so important that the linemen have trust in each other. You have 5 players, all with very different responsibilities, having to work as one cohesive unit on every single play. And if they don't, your quarterback is getting flattened, your running back is getting blown up for a loss. I don't know how many times I've made this comparison, but I'm going to continue to do it. And you can go all the way back if you want to scroll through however many years it's been, 8 years of doing this show, you want to go all the way back to when David and I first started doing the Locked On Bucs podcast. You will hear me talk about the offensive line being an orchestra, all responsible for different parts of the symphony, but they have to play it all together in order to make something beautiful. If one section plays the wrong part of the song, you are going to notice. They have to work in unison to make it happen. If Bredeson is taking all the snaps at minicamp, it's safe to assume that he will get the first, he will be the first team guard come day one at training camp. Then it's about not losing that spot so he can get comfortable between Tristan Wirfs and Graham Barton, and they can get used to working alongside of Bredeson. You cannot have a revolving door at that position again this season, or you're going to get similar results. That's the long and the short of it. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If you have Bredeson and Opeta swapping in and out at left guard, it's going to be the same thing that it was last year. You have to nail down this spot, and it's going to be up to Bredeson or Opeta to go out and take that job, not wait for it to be handed to them. Right now, looks like Bredeson is the one with the stranglehold. I think that's really, really interesting and something that I'm going to talk about with Patricia Traina. I'm going to be on an upcoming episode of Locked On Giants. She's starting to get a look at all the Giants opponents for this year, so I'm going to be on her show coming up. And certainly Ben Bredeson will be brought up. One final note that I thought was kind of cool. So my dad called me and left me a voicemail for something I was unaware of. And in the spirit of Father's Day, for those that don't know the story, my dad is the reason that I do all of this. So he and my mom lived in St. Petersburg in 1976 when the Buccaneers became a team. So he's been a fan of theirs since the jump. He's the reason I started following the Buccaneers. And then as a kid, I watched him pour hours and hours and hours into writing a book. And so, when I had the opportunity to start writing, I was kind of inspired by what I had seen my dad do. I parlayed the love of the Buccaneers that he had passed on to me, plus watching him work so hard and so diligently on writing a book. I did all of that. He inspired me to do all of it. So without my dad, I am not hosting the show. So, in the spirit of Father's Day, which was over the weekend, thank you, Dad, for doing all of that and getting me here where I am today. But he called and left me a voicemail for something that I was unaware of. And I'm not sure how many of you all knew, but I really thought it was cool enough to mention here. So as we're live here on YouTube on June 17th, this is the anniversary of the low-speed O.J. Simpson Bronco chase that so rudely interrupted the NBA Finals between the New York Knicks and the Houston Rockets. I only mention that because as a kid at the time, I didn't care about this dude driving 30 miles an hour on a highway in a white Bronco. I just wanted to watch the NBA Finals. Was that too much to ask? Thanks a lot, OJ. Anyway, while he was in the car during that chase, former Buccaneers and USC head coach John McKay called him and told him to pull over and turn himself in, pleading with him not to do anything stupid. Of course, McKay was OJ's coach with the USC Trojans, but thought that was an interesting little tidbit that my dad shared with me. I wanted to share with you a little Buccaneers connection to the most famous low-speed chase in American history. So thought that was pretty neat. Wanted to share it with all of you. Going to jump into the chat one more time before we get out of here. Let's see. We have Mike saying, welcome to Tampa, Tyler. Tyler said, Baker brought me to this team, been following his journey since 2018. We don't talk about that a whole lot. We talk about the influx of Buccaneers fans that came with Tom Brady because they wanted to follow Brady. We don't talk about how the Bucs gained some new fans because of people like Tyler that liked Baker Mayfield and have been following him and wanted to continue to root for him. So Tyler, welcome. Glad you found the show. Happy to have you here. We have Mike in the chat saying it's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. LFG, go Bucks. Lakita says, love your story. Thanks for telling us. Absolutely. Happy to do so. And again, big shout out to my dad. Thanks to him. Otherwise, I would not be hosting this awesome show and getting to interact with all of you as often as I did. And then a couple of reactions to the story. Lakita says, OMG. Tyler drops a whoa in there. Mike just says Knicks and Rockets that year. Yes, I was rooting for the Rockets because, as many children of the 90s, I was a Bulls fan, loved Michael Jordan, and hated the New York Knicks because of it. So I was rooting for Hakeem the Dream to win that NBA Finals. I still believe that if Jordan hadn't left for baseball, the Bulls win 8 consecutive NBA Finals, just continuing to solidify that Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. And before anybody argues with me in the chat about that, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you all so much for joining in on this episode. We will have another episode dropping on Wednesday, one more on Thursday, and that'll wrap up the week. In the meantime, check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're subscribed on YouTube, turn on those notifications. Every time I go live, you will know, and then you can join in all the fun with people like Lakita and Mark and Tyler and BB King and Fausto and you know, everybody that joins in the live chat. It's always a good time in there. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.